Prime Minister has promised to get more people into work with reforms to overhaul job centres and more mental health funding. Brilliant. He said the government had inherited a country that isn't working, said K Starmer. Nothing, by the way, in this, more diatribe, nothing in this explaining how he's going to get Britain back to work.
Terrified Starmer is making excuses for his incompetence, but Jeremy Kyle won't let him get away.
I would guarantee without any doubt, that those people will never forget what he's done. What is he thinking, Brendan? What's going on in his stupid head? Does he honestly think that these 3.5 million women will ever forgive him for saying in 2022?
The British public will not forgive Starmer for the massive betrayal that Jeremy just exposed.
This man is going against... I mean, he can have no future, Starmer, if he carries on with this, can he? I know he's got 5 years, but really beyond that. I mean, he's a dead man walking already, isn't he?
He's a complete fool.
It's absolutely over for Starmer, and he could lose everything in an instant.
Right? EV, straight away, exactly what we thought, 1,100 jobs. This is what happens if you go for this whole climate and sustainable crap that we talk about every single day. 1,100 people losing their jobs.
Starmer just made a huge blunder, and Jeremy Kyle wants him thrown out of office.
So there's that, and of course the fact that there hasn't been a Labour government anywhere ever that has left unemployment lower after leaving office. We're only 5 months into this hapless, crazy, woke government, and already we're seeing not just a few job losses, but major plants closing.
Labour ruins everything it touches, and Starmer's incompetence is making things worse.
It's 1,100 people who are losing their jobs because you've decided, Starmer, ironically, that it would be much more important to have clean energy. And listen, I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday. I don't pretend to be an expert at all. I don't understand when we've got oil and gas in plentiful supply under our ground, right? Why we would ignore that and try and create other energy that isn't going to work, and we're going to have to import it at other cost. To me, that's just you're a businessman. That doesn't make any sense to anybody, does it?
Jeremy Kyle rips into Starmer over his stupid little schemes that are putting people out of jobs.
Britain, Labour isn't working.
Campaign.
Yeah, well, today the Prime Minister has promised to get more people into work with reforms to overhaul job centres and more mental health funding. Brilliant. He said the government had inherited a country that isn't working, said K Starmer. Nothing, by the way, in this, more diatribe, nothing in this explaining how he's going to get Britain back to work. Sort of lukewarm talkings yesterday about getting people off benefit.
Meanwhile, delusional Starmer has the audacity to promise that he'll increase employment rates.
I can look at the number of 2.8 million.
There's 1 million people off work right now saying they have depression or anxiety.
So I can look at 2.8 million, as I said to Ian in the handover, and say that I am really happy. In fact, I'm proud to be part of a country that says, you know what, if you're disabled or you're really mentally ill, really ill, and I was in a dark place 5 years ago, but nothing like somebody who would really not be able to function. I'm proud to pay my taxes. What I am not prepared to do, as I believe most people would agree, is pay for people to go, oh, I'm traumatised, I'm suffering from anxiety because of that I have to be off for 6 months.
Jeremy Kyle is a true patriot, but paying benefits for lazy people using excuses is unacceptable for everyone.
The reason we have to have immigration, they told me, was because there are a series of jobs, and I can only come up with a couple, hospital porters, people like that nobody wants to do. So we need to impart these people into this country.
Fruit picking.
So, yeah. So the 2.8 million, will be really generous, you and I, saying 1.8 are mentally ill and disabled, so that's 1 million people. I would tell them they ain't getting jack from society unless they are made to do those jobs, or at least give something back to this society.
In what fantasy land is it okay for Labour to keep importing migrants while millions of British citizens are jobless and on welfare?
But that, mate, you are so right. So what we're saying to anybody, the Labour Party is saying to anybody that has a business, which for me creates wealth because it creates jobs and it creates growth that way. If you've succeeded or worked hard, we're going to punish you. We're not going to accept that you create wealth, you create jobs, we're going to punish you. You're absolutely right. Those people pay the most tax, they will disappear, and in 2 or 3 years it will be exactly what it was the last time with the socialist government.
Starmer and his gang of hypocritical cronies hate the wealthy and will destroy the economy to punish them.
We've already discussed how Vauxhall is closing its van plant in Luton because of this move towards electric vehicles. Thank you, you idiot, K Starmer. He's on the front foot today saying he wants to get Britain back to work. We're not quite sure how, but there we go.
Sorry, Rachel Reeves was only saying yesterday,
I didn't listen, I just had the sound off.
Less than 24 hours ago, Jeremy, Rachel Reeves was on her feet at the lectern talking about how her budget was a budget for jobs. 24 hours later, Vauxhall announced 1,100 job losses.
The utter idiocy of shoving these climate change policies down everyone's throat is leading to an economic shutdown, and Starmer doesn't care to stop. They're so tone deaf that they have genuinely deluded themselves into thinking that they'll create more jobs while actively destroying all growth. Starmer is out of touch with reality, and Jeremy Kyle rightfully shreds him apart. The massive job loss isn't the only bombshell that he dropped. In fact, Starmer has been up to some shady business, and the truth is absolutely appalling.
I've watched for 23 weeks a man win a huge majority by saying nothing. I always knew he was a socialist, but seemingly set about, and you can call them Tory voters, you can call them legitimate targets. I would call pensioners, farmers, Brexiteers, small business owners, waspy women. I would call them legitimate parts of the structure of the United Kingdom.
Jeremy Kyle was always skeptical of Starmer from the very start. He knew that Starmer could not be trusted and had socialist sympathies. Turns out, Jeremy was absolutely right, and Starmer is nothing but a fraud. Throughout the election campaign, Starmer lied to the British public about this supposed utopia that he'd create and promised a whole bunch of things. Now, only a few months later, we're seeing Starmer's true colours. Make no mistake, it gets much worse the more you look into the details.
I would guarantee without any doubt, that those people will never forget what he's done. What is he thinking, Brendan? What's going on in his stupid head? Does he honestly think that these 3.5 million women will ever forgive him for saying in 2022, it's an injustice, they will be compensated, that's Labour's commitment, today we can't afford it?
Starmer doesn't seem to understand that actions have consequences. That's majorly because, so far, he has not been held accountable for the massive blunders that he has made. Time and time again, Starmer proved to this nation just how out of touch with reality and incompetent he is. Now he's terrified and running around trying to do damage control. Of course, nobody will forgive Starmer for the things that he has done, and in the next elections, people will remember all his horrible policies.
This is turning out to be an incredibly cruel, classist government, and you're right, people will not forget.
And this is my point. And, you know, when I was growing up, you're much younger than me, but when I was growing up, Labour was about the working classes. The Labour Party was about labourers. I don't believe that the working classes north of the bloody bubble of the M25 that I go on about every single day, I don't believe that they believe that Labour is their party anymore.
Even this time, Starmer promised that he would stand for the working class and bring genuine reform to make our lives easier. Look how that turned out. Starmer and his gang have exclusively done everything they could to make our lives more miserable, and it's not clear if they stand for anything at all. One after another, we see them involved in huge scandals. Were they ever honest about anything, or was it all just a scam to get in power and get freebies from the liberal elites? No wonder Reform UK and Nigel Farage are absolutely demolishing Labour in the polls.
But the thing is, what Reform has got going for it is precisely what you said earlier, which is that the Labour Party is now the anti-Labour Party. It is anti-working class. It is taking money from out of people's banks. It is treating them like muck. It looks down its noses at ordinary people. There is a real opening for a smart party to sweep up working class votes. And Reform has done that in different ways and different guises. And it did very well at the election, the last general election. But I think we need a real push. We need a party that will very openly appeal to ordinary people.
Labour, under Starmer's disastrous leadership, have betrayed everything that they once stood for. Nobody trusts them anymore since they practically set fire to all of their credibility. Even now, Labour is doing horribly in the polls and people are already fed up with them. In fact, a recent petition gained traction to the tune of millions of signatures that demanded a new general election. At this rate, Labour won't win another election for another decade, and Nigel Farage is swooping in with common sense to win people over.
I find fascinating about it as a viewpoint. I loathe the Liberal Democrats. I don't even know what they stand for, bar some mythical joke of a leader who gets dressed up in a leotard and jumps in the sea the whole time. But what they did do brilliantly in the last election was they targeted 80 seats that they knew Labour were nowhere near getting and the Tories were vulnerable, and they walked away with 72 seats with about 500,000, I think, votes less than Reform.
Jeremy is absolutely right about Reform's ambitions. The Liberal Democrats, despite being irrelevant and unimportant, managed to win a good number of seats in the last election. There's nothing stopping Nigel Farage and Reform UK from doing the same and even aiming higher. In fact, in another interview with Richard Tice, the deputy leader of Reform, Jeremy confirms this possibility. Britain is in a very volatile period right now, and things are looking over for Starmer, especially since his sinister plan got recently exposed.
I'm talking working class men, a couple with their own businesses, a paramedic, somebody who worked for the police, all sorts of, all watching their football team, the Toon, none of them, Brendan, none of them would even consider voting for the Tories ever again. No, they loathe Labour. They are all Reform voters. They all believe, as working class men who have dragged themselves up, by the way, before the Labour Party charged them even more tax.
The Tories messed up and will need some serious miracles to regain the public support. And unless Kemi Badenoch manages to completely turn the party around very soon, there's little hope for them. As for Labour, they've made a complete fool of themselves and Starmer is their designated clown. That leaves a perfect power vacuum for Nigel Farage and Reform to take over and potentially win. The Brits have spoken, they want someone who'd stand up for them and listen to common sense. Meanwhile, Starmer doesn't have any sense at all, and the consequences of his disastrous policies are already showing up.
New Year's Eve rail chaos, we find out today, as train managers announce strike over rest days, New Year's Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and every Sunday for the next 5 months. They've just had 15%. They get 81 grand for a 4-day week, man. What is wrong with these people?
Remember the insane pay rises Starmer gave to the trade unions? Everyone warned him that not only would that be horrible for the economy, it would make the unions keep demanding more. And now we see exactly that happening. The train drivers are threatening to strike unless their outrageous demands are met, and surely enough, Starmer will bend the knee and do whatever they want.
What will happen is the Labour Party will come into power, as they've done, give huge pay rises to the people who have supported them and got them there, because that's what happened, it's a deal. And then every other union with a bloody brain cell goes, well, they've had 20%, I want 20%. And guess what? 2 years later, every union's had a pay rise. If they're not, they're on strike. And because they've all got it, inflation's through the bleeding roof and everybody's screwed. And that's the reality of what we're talking about. So, yeah, for me, the problems pile up for Keir Starmer. I think it's been, for me, the 6 months of Starmer has been the most astonishingly bad start.
Jeremy Kyle has seen what Starmer and the Labour Party are capable of, and he's warning everyone of the mess that they'll end up creating. This is nothing new, they'll keep feeding the unions, and the unions will keep demanding more. In the end, it's the working class Brits that will suffer the most. The consequences are obvious: higher pays, lower productivity, and the economy will plummet. As if Rachel Reeves isn't ruining the economy enough already. Of course, none of this compares to the idiotic plan Starmer is cooking.
61% of people in this country said that he was the worst Prime Minister in modern history. Now, if you think what we've had recently, Liz Truss, bless her, Boris Johnson, nearly Michael Foot, nearly Jeremy Corbyn, I mean, that's pretty damning. On the back of that, he thought it would be a really good day to announce his... I can't even believe I'm reading this. He's sending a surrender squad of 100 civil servants, the Blob, that was actually making them come into work because they're usually off work. They're going to go to Brussels to, quote, junk Brexit for closer EU ties.
Starmer has been voted to be the worst Prime Minister in recent history, and that isn't enough of a reality check for him. This bloke is so tone deaf that he thinks everyone who doesn't agree with him is wrong. Naturally, Jeremy Kyle doesn't hold back at demolishing his stupid little delusions. The worst of which is Starmer's obsession with the European Union. He's so hell-bent on rejoining that he's willing to undermine the democratic decision of millions of people in this country. Is this how a Prime Minister should behave?
Yes, everybody knows it. He doesn't care about the United Kingdom. He doesn't care about Brexit. He will do anything, will he not, to bring us closer to Europe. Where does that leave the people, Richard Tice, who voted 8 years ago in a referendum and won the vote? Where does that leave people like that?
Raging.
Starmer could lose everything in this scandal. This might really be the final straw for the British public to completely abandon him, and even Labour is in crisis mode. They're running around trying their absolute best to damage control Starmer's shenanigans, and they're miserably failing at it. Things are pretty obvious by now that Starmer doesn't actually care about this nation or its people. Virtually everything he has done is a complete betrayal of the working class citizens.
I can't work out, you're in the House, I can't work out whether he's completely incompetent. He thinks I've got such a big majority that in 5 years people will have forgotten. But almost every decision, Richard, in the last 5 months, be it the pensioners, the farmers, the EU, These are not just throwaway things. I can guarantee that the British pensioners will not forget.
Even Jeremy Kyle can't figure out why Starmer is behaving like a third world dictator. He thinks he can do whatever he wants and not face the consequences for his actions, and his audacity alone is baffling. At this point, Starmer deserves an award for how delusional he is. Judging from the way he is behaving, this will be the last election that Labour has won with a huge majority in a very long time. There's a furious backlash coming, and Starmer is not ready for it.
And the same will happen here with people who voted for Brexit, people who believed that that was going to happen, whether it was flawed or not. And actually, the irony of all of this is it's very short-sighted of Keir Starmer. So is it incompetence? Is it because he doesn't care? Because if this 5 months is replicated another 9 times, 10 times, whatever it is for 5 years, I don't think the Labour Party will win for 30 years, man.
In just 5 months of being in government, Keir Starmer has managed to bring Britain to its knees. It's no exaggeration that if things continue like this, Starmer will be absolutely done for, especially since there's already rumours that Labour is looking to get rid of him before he continues to damage their reputation any further. He's completely clobbering every single demographic, be it the farmers, the pensioners, the businesses, or the working class Brits in general. Now, with this huge betrayal, Starmer is behaving like an idiot who has no clue on how to run a government.
Then there's absolute ideological lurch towards a mild form of communism, which is what we've got, where basically the government seems quite happy if the state ends up owning large chunks of land. It can carpet with lots of billions of solar panels made in.
The mask is off and Starmer is showing his true nature. The problem here is Labour's ideological insanity that's driving all of these decisions. It's no secret that they have always admired communism and already have a heavy socialist bent. Beyond that, none of their policies make any sense at all. They're ruining the lives of farmers while relying heavily on imports. The massive taxes that they've burned the farmers with will mean that the farmers will end up having to give up their lands. Is it then any wonder that Nigel Farage is gaining so much support?
I'll go further and say I think the British people have got to a point where, and I call it the Trump moment, I believe that they will now swallow a politician who stands up, man and woman, and says, right, this is me and this is my plan. I have been married twice, I've made a few mistakes, I might have done that when I was 16, I'm flawed, but this is my plan. Come with me, there'll be highs, there'll be lows, but I'm gonna take you on that journey. I'm not gonna BS you, I'm gonna give you on a daily basis, a weekly basis, whatever. I think that's the Trump phenomenon. I think it's just people are fed up with being lied to and not knowing what they're going to get.
We've seen it happen with Donald Trump. We're seeing it happen in Britain now. The people are fed up with idiotic governments making their lives miserable and are just looking for a breath of fresh air. Nigel Farage is banking on that by simply arguing common sense things. He's bringing up the actual problems that the people of this nation are facing, not some ideologically charged stupid climate schemes. Starmer might very well lose everything and Labour will not survive very long at this rate.
Sir Keir woke up this morning, quite sad actually, because he was, opinion poll said he's the worst Prime Minister in modern history. Bear in mind we've had Liz Truss. And then he decided to announce that he was sending a surrender squad ready to junk Brexit for closer EU ties. 100 civil servants will run a team set to abandon the freedoms of leaving the bloc. It comes as the UK formally joined the Indo-Pacific Economic Trade Pact over the weekend, a move made possible by regaining powers through Brexit.
Starmer somehow managed to outdo all the horrible messes of prime ministers we've had over the years. He doesn't have any semblance of common sense for him to still be making the same delusional mistakes even after the continued backlash. Starmer needs to either re-evaluate his choices or get ready to lose his job as the Prime Minister of Britain very soon.
This man is going against... he can have no future, Starmer, if he carries on at this, can he? I know he's got 5 years, but really beyond that. I mean, he's a dead man walking already, isn't he?
He's a complete fool. The only way that we could strike a good deal with the European Union in our current context is through a process of deregulation and massive economic growth.
Keir Starmer is incredibly foolish or naive if he thinks that rejoining the EU will be good for this nation. He tries to claim that we're just building closer ties, but everyone can see the reality. What's more is that we're seeing the consequences already, as the European Union has put forward some insane demands. Of course, Starmer has no backbone, so he'll just go ahead and agree to them and further chain us back. Instead of building stronger ties with America, Starmer is just doing whatever he wants and we'll be the ones who will bear the consequences.
But I can't genuinely work out whether it's complete incompetence, a blind belief that he's got 5 years and it doesn't matter. Some of the decisions are so ludicrously short-sighted that I actually... Shall I tell you why I think Starmer won't survive?
Jeremy Kyle truly believes that Starmer won't survive, and his reasoning is spot on. Starmer has made nothing but short-sighted and ridiculous decisions in the past 5 months, and nobody can understand why. He seems to believe that since Labour won with such a huge majority, they can do whatever they want, no questions asked. Of course, that's just another one of Starmer's massive delusions, and the reality will come crashing down soon.
Because I think even people inside the Labour Party, well, it'll be two-way. It'll either be somebody going, he's not left enough, right? Or there'll be a coup. Or it'll be somebody like a Wes Streeting going, this is barking mad. We'll never be elected for another 30 years unless we take the foot off. It's ridiculous. There doesn't seem to be any sort of plan. And listen, he might be there for 5 years, but I'll tell you something. He is going to go... I mean, we've had a few bad ones, but he's going to go down as one of the worst ever. It's extraordinary to me. Extraordinary.
Yeah. Starmer thinks that he's irreplaceable, and that'll be his undoing. So far, he's been running around making one giant mess after another. It's like we've appointed a toddler to govern us who throws temper tantrums whenever things don't go his way. The Labour Party sees this, and they're not that stupid to let this man continue to ruin their credibility. Starmer might just lose everything if the backlash continues, as Labour themselves will end up getting rid of him. And that's good news, since it means that your voice is being heard. Hold Starmer accountable and make your voice heard by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.